Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man discovers a long-lost language. So, on this ordinary Christmas, things have become the strangest. Because I stumbled upon a dead language.
As part of my doctorate, I was hired as a lab assistant working with pediatric treatment. We were working on a paper measuring the exposure effect of a potential contaminant, while my colleagues were working on the measured effects on adults and the elderly. My team would work with children. The potential disruption to developing adolescence was deemed important enough to have a separate set of experiments and measurements. The study garnered unilateral attention and funding of not only one, but 4 different pharmaceutical companies, Hatchet PH being the main contributor. I was hired pretty late in the process. I wasn't even sure what the contaminant was, as it was just designated as the contaminant. Apparently it was something that resided just under the topsoil in a large residential area. To not taint our measurements, me and my colleagues were given minimum information about the symptoms to look for and what to expect. Instead, we were provided a set of experiments and willing participants. It was all fast and haphazard. Most of us started on a Monday, and Tuesday the following week was the day of our first experiment. Little time to prepare, get settled, or even understand. Still, this could be big enough to launch a career. The experiment, described as the Cognition and Ocular Development Assessment, CODA, was to be performed with full consent and supervision of the parental guardians. All children were between 6 to 10 years old, and none of them had any observed deformities or illnesses. We were given limited access to certain medical records to make sure our study didn't have the potential to cause any harm. Then again, I'd read the experiment checklist, and there was nothing that could damage anyone. If anything, I argued the results would be pretty much useless. As Tuesday came around, me and my 2 colleagues had prepared as best we could. The 3 of us would put 1 participant each through a series of tests. The CODA was 3 tests over a total of 3 hours. The parents were to be asked for consent before and after each step, and given the ability to stop any test at any given time. The experiment overall was surprisingly simple. It was supposed to be a measurement of cognitive and emotional development, mostly tested through facial and spatial recognition. The day of the experiment, I first met Logan, an 8-year-old kid sporting a baseball cap and a brand new Pokemon t-shirt. His mom was a bit anxious, but from what I'd been told, she'd been generously compensated. As I met them in the parking lot and lead them inside, I promised her we'd go through the specifics. "Don't worry," I said. "We're mostly going to look at pictures. Doesn't sound too bad, huh?" He shook his head, but I'd yet to see him smile. Maybe his mom's anxiety rubbed off on him. The testing room was somewhat small and made entirely out of concrete. There was a pair of opposite 2-way mirrors on each side of the room. The walls were painted this sickly mint green, a color so neutral it hurt to look at. The first test was all about emotional intelligence. In sets of 6 pictures each, I was to show Logan various expressions and ask him which mostly correlated to an emotion. If they answered objectively wrong, according to a chart, we were supposed to ask them to explain their choice. Simple enough, I'd done something similar before. But this is where I first realized that Logan wasn't some ordinary kid. As I laid out the first image set, I asked him to identify the happiest face. Clearly, it was card number 3, and Logan answered as such without hesitation. In the second image set, he was asked which one was the saddest. Again, it was number 3. He answered correctly again. In the third picture, the 6 pictures were a wild mix. Some sad, some happy. One guy was sleeping in the corner. "Which one is the angriest?" I asked. There was a correct answer. Number 4. A woman furrowing her brow and exposing her teeth. Yet Logan looked at them all for a long time.
"Number 6,
he said finally, pointing at the sleeping man. "How come?" I asked, following protocol.
it's complicated. They almost killed his mom."
The kid seemed almost distant, staring at the picture. What the hell? He answered the rest of the questions flawlessly, but that answer stuck with me. Such a strange reaction. Not only did he answer wrong to an obvious question, but it was also such an odd explanation. Logan himself seemed to have trouble finding the right word for it. The second test was similar, but there were new cards. In sets of 3, Logan was supposed to explain each emotion presented by the people in the pictures. Happy, sad, angry, scared. It was similar to the first test, but much more detailed. For every image, there would be a description and a short explanation given by the participant. We pressed forward. First 3 cards, no problem. Happy, happy, sad. Easy explanations. Second set of cards, same result. Surprised, sad, sad. But when the third image set came along, I didn't know what to say. 3 people, all completely neutral. Not a single emotion on their face. They looked almost computer-generated. Logan didn't skip a beat, though.
She's scared,
He said.
She doesn't know why she's doing this.
And what about this one?
Oh, he's hungry. He just doesn't show it.
Hungry? Is that the emotion?
Yeah, he's really hungry. Dangerous.
And the third one? Logan took a long, hard look. After a few seconds, he looked up at me, almost like he forgot about the picture for a while.
Okay, I think he's Obstin.
Obstin?
Yeah, Obstin.
What do you mean?
That's what he is. I don't know a better word for it.
So why is he, obstin?
He saw something he shouldn't have.
We continued with several more image sets, and Logan gave mostly ordinary answers. But every now and then he'd throw in something absurd sounding. Obstin was the first, but there was also ADR, Gald, and Shriet. The descriptions were outlandish and, frankly, nonsensical. A doctor. He stared too long into the light. Gald. He didn't go swimming, but his feet are still wet. Shrit. He fell between the cracks. By the time I was about to start the third experiment, I had a few moments alone with Logan's mom. Still anxious, she held her arms close to herself and didn't meet my eyes. "We'll be done in a bit," I said. "He's doing great."
He's such an imaginative child, you know.
She nodded.
He makes up things all the time. You should see his drawings.
"Does he have any trouble at school?"
No, not really, no.
She smiled.
Well, mostly not. Some of the other kids can get a bit creeped out when he starts making things up.
I checked the clock. It was time to start the final experiment. All kids have a quirk or two, I smiled back. That's what makes them kids. The final experiment was about recognizing places rather than people. One by one, I was to show Logan pictures of various places. Ordinary places like supermarkets, playgrounds, and factories. They were pretty easy to recognize. First, I'd show him the pictures. Then, I'd ask him to describe the scene. Logan didn't seem to mind. The pictures themselves was easy for Logan to recognize. One by one, he explained what he saw. Factories with lots of cars parked outside, empty playgrounds. But as we got to a park, he sort of stopped. His expression shifted.
That's a graveyard.
He said. I had to stop myself from correcting him. It was obviously not a graveyard. Can you describe it? I asked.
I really don't want to. There's a lot of people there.
What kind of people? I was going off script, but I was just too curious. Logan leaned in to look closer at the picture.
There's a lot of strange colors,
he said.
The people who used to be there are gone.
I couldn't tell what he was seeing. The picture was empty. As we finished up, Logan went to the bathroom. I got some time to talk to his mom on our own, and I brought out the picture of the park. Do you have any idea what he sees here? I asked.
No.
She said, shaking her head.
Could be anything.
It's just strange, I said. Usually kids make up stories about dragons, lasers, wizards, and that kind of stuff. Not graveyards and parks.
Are you calling my son strange?
I lost my train of thought. As Logan came back, she grabbed him by the arm as to leave. Before they did, I caught up to them. I had to try something. Logan, I said, just a moment. They stopped, and his mom gave me a tired look. I was thinking about buying this house, I said, bringing up a photo of a place I'd been checking out a few times. What do you think? He just stared at me as if he didn't understand. He took off his baseball cap and scratched his ear.
Looks dirty.
He said,
A lot of art, Joe. Right there in the...
Come on, Logan.
His mother tugged his arm, and he was almost dragged down the hall. Turning back to me one last time, he yelled back,
He looked up, and then he didn't.
I didn't lie when I said I was thinking about buying that house. There was an open viewing the next day, and I decided to drop by on my lunch break. There were about 8 other people there, all couples. I kind of disappeared among them. Maybe I wasn't being considered as a serious buyer. The place was a bit too large for me after all. As the realtor ran off to speak to a pregnant couple, I stopped in the foyer. I had this strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Ro, I whispered to myself. Right here. Just saying it out loud almost made me feel it. It was something so specific, so unique. It wasn't an emotion as much as it was an experience, a story. I could imagine myself lying on the floor, looking up at the wood-brown ceiling. I could feel my back growing stiff as if I'd been lying down for too long. I could feel my eyes growing thick, like blinking through mud. Every breath a conscious effort, arms unresponsive, a prayer for my heart to keep beating. Then nothing. Ro, to look up and then to not. I had this strange understanding, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. Didn't the kid have a word for that too? God, I felt sick. Everyone was gathered around the realtor in the living room. I don't know what gave me the courage to confront him, but I just blurted it out. Did the previous owner die here? I asked. In the foyer?
No, they didn't.
He answered.
You have to tell us if they did.
One of the couples said. Another couple agreed.
Okay, yeah, I mean, no one has died here. That much is true. No one did. But yes, they were found unresponsive in the foyer.
There were loud sighs. A couple immediately left. Another left shortly afterwards. There was a queue to talk to the realtor, and within 10 minutes, I was the only one left. Ro or not, I got the place too cheap to care. This made me curious as to the words the kid had used to describe the various places and emotions. Over the following days, as I transcribed our findings, I started thinking about them a lot more. Staring into the light too long? To get wet feet without swimming, it was all just cryptic nonsense. But what I'd felt that first night in my new house, that was a Ro. I could feel it. It was the right way to describe it. One night, as I stood in the bathroom, I thought about the word aider. It was what Logan had used to describe staring into the light for too long. It felt fitting, but I didn't know if I'd experienced it. I tried looking up into the bathroom light and just saying it out loud, but I didn't get the same feeling as when I'd said "ho" in the foyer. This wasn't it. This wasn't a deer. I sort of gave up on it after a while. But as I was watching TV, the thought came creeping back to me. There was a news segment about a patient with severe brain damage, a woman who couldn't breathe on her own or speak. She was aware in a sense, but completely imprisoned in her body. The segment focused on how her family was caring for her, but I just leaned in closer and looked at her. Aider, I whispered to myself. That's it. And it was. No question about it. She was Audra from staring into the light too long. I could feel it, understand it. Over the next couple of days, I started chasing gald. The word meant someone whose feet was wet, despite not swimming. It took me a while to get this one, but I finally found it in a newspaper article online. I felt galled from reading about a man who had died from an overdose down at the beach. His body had apparently choked itself, causing him to sweat to death. As he was homeless and living close to the beach, he'd been found by a couple of teenagers building a sandcastle. But that feeling of drowning on dry land next to the ocean, that was gold. With the right word, I could feel it. I could empathize. In my mind, I could be there with him. But the final word I'd noted, srit. That was a difficult one. Over several days, I looked all over the internet. I searched forums, read obscure articles ranging back to the 90s, but I just couldn't shoot blindly into the web and hope for the best. I had to find out more, get something substantial. That thought made me take a step back. What about the photos? The photos we had shown Logan in the first place? Who were the people in the photos? I checked the inventory list for the experiment. Most of the cards were just mentioned as a number and emotion, but I noticed that some of the faces were repeated with the same actors. All the cards which Logan had gotten right were repeated at least once, but the weird ones. Those were unique faces. The lighting was different. They didn't show any peculiar emotions. They were just strange people. A bit off. I took a few photos with my phone and tried to do an image search. I couldn't get a single hit. These pictures simply weren't available anywhere online. The ordinary emotions displayed could be found on various stock image sites, but not the strange ones that Logan pointed out. Finally, after a few hours and dozens of pages clicked through, I did find a picture that looked like one of the models, but in a completely different setting, and this was freaking weird. The picture I found online was from a social media profile. The profile, in turn, portrayed the user page of the very same homeless man that had drowned in his own sweat from an overdose. The same one I'd read an article of. But the article was written just a few days prior, and the picture must have been taken at least weeks ago. Listen, I don't know if you can get this. What Logan did was to perfectly describe, using one of his made-up words, was exactly what was about to happen to that man. The man who galled, who overdosed on the beach. I mulled the whole thing over in my head countless times, and finally, I just gave up. I had to talk to Logan again. I did the creepiest thing I've ever done. I tracked the kid down at his school. The following day, as he was about to get on the bus back home, I waved at him from across the parking lot. He was surprised to see me and couldn't place me at first. Then I could see him recognize me, like something lit up in his mind.
Hey!
He called out.
Science man!
Hey Logan, I called back. How's it been?
Good.
He said.
You're not here for more tests, are you?
He stopped a few feet ahead of me. Actually, I'm just here to ask you about that language of yours. Those strange words you use. How do you come up with them?
That's easy.
He said.
Once you start talking it, you kinda don't stop. After a while, you just feel them, you know?
So, where did you learn it? I asked. Anywhere special?
I think I always knew, he shrugged. Like, it's weird, like listening, but not to a sound, but like a color. It's just sorta there, inside.
So you can always see it? Because sometimes you said people in pictures were just happy or sad. Ordinary things?
Well, sometimes those things are easier to see. You said I should answer fast, not, accurately.
So you can see it now? I chuckled. Anywhere? Here, with me?
Sure.
He smiled.
Just stand still for a bit.
Logan looked at me for a while. As I met his eyes, I could feel something. There was that feeling again. Obstinate. To see something I shouldn't have. Right there, in that kid's eyes. He knew something. Strangely enough, it wasn't him that broke the silence. It was me. Atho S, I said. I didn't know why I said it, but it took Logan by surprise.
The one who shouts until they listen.
He said.
That's what it means, right? I think that's me.
I said, and I'm sorry, Logan, I don't know why I said that.
Did you see it?
He asked, almost excited.
Do you see it now?
I want to say that I didn't. I want to say I saw nothing, but that'd be a lie. A million little words crept into my mind, and as I stared into that kid's eyes, I saw something I shouldn't have. Now it was all becoming clearer. The more words I knew, the better I understood. The word I'd looked for, Zrit, was a lot more complex than Logan had made it out to be with human words. It was contextual. The man had died in an earthquake. He fell between the cracks. No, he hadn't. He was going to. It was describing events destined to unfold. But it was also describing something that had happened. Was it both? Neither? I see it, Ted, I admitted. Right there, I could feel the parking lot falling away in insignificance. With a single unspoken word, we could tell each other infinite things. These mundane expressions were just the tip of the iceberg, a dumbed-down shadow of what was truly being said. The words told us of things that were, things that could be, and things that currently was. And in that moment of silence, of understanding, I heard the vibrant colors so clearly I could almost see them. They were piercing into my mind, forcing themselves into my understanding, screaming to me that once you understand something, you can't unlearn it. I forgot to breathe, as to not accidentally say something I shouldn't. You weren't talking about the picture I held up in the test. You were looking at me, I said with nothing but a shallow breath. Obsten. I'm Obsten. You didn't even look at the picture. He didn't have to answer. I knew it was true. It was written into the word itself that my realization would come. Then, as possibilities came rushing towards me, I could feel an enormous weight come down on me. My mind couldn't take it. My body was shutting down as I fell to my knees, screaming until my neck felt raw. The world started to fade as my heartbeat swallowed my hearing. I have a hard time describing what happened next. When I closed my eyes, I'd see millions of possibilities, mostly pain, suffering, and terror. My own thoughts and emotions multiplied like a torch in a hall of mirrors. I'd see myself waking up in my bed, only to get murdered by 1,000 different weapons. I'd see myself drowning in my bathtub, breaking my neck, falling down the stairs. Death. So much death. And then in the blink of an eye, I'd be in the back of an ambulance, feeling the residual effect of a defibrillator on my chest. As I blinked, the ambulance burst into flames. The driver crashed into a tree, someone carving their initials into my chest with a scalpel. None of it was real, but I couldn't tell anymore. Different worlds with nothing but a well-placed syllable. All the while, I was just spitting out seemingly random words. My eyes lost focus, and as I lost grip of reality, my body shut itself down in self-defense. Thank God. This was back in January of 2019. Logan was born with this language, already stored in the back of his mind, some kind of residual effect from his contamination. But for people like you and me, we can't take it all at once, so over the years, with intense therapy to back me up, I've settled on trying to learn one single word. I'm going to find out as much as I can about just what it means to be obstinate, the word describing me. There was so much to that one word that you could fill a lifetime with it. In a way, maybe that was the point. A God language, meant to fit all of our very beings into simple expressions, like compressing a folder into a zip file. But that's just the thing. To learn what it really means to be obstinate, to be my word, I can't really do anything else but to live and see what happens. Not unless I want to go back to where my mind wandered off to. Still, sometimes I can feel something creeping back into my mind. Little tingles, syllables and sounds, reminding me of all the knowledge I still have stored away somewhere in my inner madness. Little words with galactic proportions. It is so easy to slip back into that mind, just inches away from the edge of what my physical brain can hold. I sometimes wonder what all your words are. I sometimes wonder what they mean. I'll really try not to think about it.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man performing a series of odd jobs to pay the bills finds himself in over his head when he gets a job for a dance studio. So, do you have stage fright? You might, especially when you see the broken dancer of the Ghost Ballet.
It takes a lot of work to keep culture alive in a big city. I've dedicated most of my life to arranging community projects and keeping people engaged. Late-night movie screenings, flea markets, chaperoning, youth centers, concerts, game nights, you name it. I'm the face in the crowd that people can't help but to recognize. It didn't take long for me to expand my interest to amateur theater, opera, and ballet. While I didn't know much about what makes a ballet or opera good, I did know a thing or two about promotion and just keeping a steady schedule. So over time, I became a sort of a tag-along. And while I couldn't speak a line of dialogue without looking at a paper or stand on my toes for a plie, I'd grown quite essential to the local performance groups. I didn't get paid much, but enough to get by. I had a total of 16 so-called micro jobs that paid the bills. But I'd been looking to get into something a bit more stable. So, using my experience with the local cultural scene, I applied for a full-time job at a local and very prestigious ballet school. This place had international recognition, and lo and behold, I got the job. Mostly administration and logistics, but I also just helped out during classes. One of my favorite things to do was to help with flyers and social media accounts. I've always been a bit of a hobby photographer, and ballet has such stunning visuals. I had worked there for 8 months when we were putting on one of our biggest shows yet, our rendition of Coppelia. There'd been all kinds of drama for months about who was getting which part, what venue we would use, what costume design to go for, all kinds of issues. I tried to help to the best of my abilities, but there was a limit to what I could do. I'd read up a lot on ballet history during my time there, and it is a genuinely interesting subject. So, when we were getting closer to the first show date, I had an idea. See, back in the late 1800s, there was a tradition among certain Parisian companies to perform a ghost ballet. It was essentially just a final rehearsal with a few more extra steps, but it was something I'd never seen performed. The ghost ballet is performed the day before the first show. It is performed to an empty audience and with no music. The idea is that by keeping the seats empty, you leave room for past dancers to bless your performance. And by performing without music or killing the music, it leaves room for instruments past to be heard by the spectral audience. It is all just a way to remind the performers of their prestigious history, and also paying your respects to those who came before. The dance itself is usually just a silent version of whatever you're debuting the following night. I suggested we perform a ghost ballet for our Coppelia debut. I could take pictures and make a few posts about it on our social media accounts. Hell, we could even make it a bit spooky by using the black outfits from our Swan Lake performance. It would make the rehearsal a bit more fun, while also paying tribute. Everyone was on board. Sabrine, who had the role of Swanhilda, went all in. She even suggested we take it a step further by inviting friends and adding a sort of skeleton makeup. I wasn't completely on board with it, but the others loved it. How could I say no? So when the night of the Ghost Ballet came, it was a mini event in and of itself. There were about 20 people in the audience, and we dimmed the lights. The music was turned off, but it felt like we missed the point of it when there were friends and family invited. The point was to keep the seats empty, but yeah, times change, I suppose. The performance went perfectly fine. I think the relaxed atmosphere made them all take a few more risks and really give it their all. People were cheering from the crowd, and in the dim lights, it all looked sort of haunting. Just hearing their feet panting was strangely unnerving. I took plenty of pictures. Our followers would love this. When the show was over, I couldn't help but feel like I'd done something wrong. The dancers seemed happy, though. 2 of the guests even brought flowers to throw on stage. Mostly discolored blue sunflowers picked outside. But still, it was a nice gesture. Sabrine was beaming. But all in all, this hadn't been a true ghost ballet. But the dancers were happy, so all is well that ends well. Not quite. As I was driving home that night, I had this awful feeling. I'd uploaded a few pictures and made some posts on our social pages, but I couldn't help but feel that we'd missed the point. They just had fun with it, but the tradition itself had originally been a means of reverence. It wasn't meant to be posted about online or for the dancers to dress up in black with skeleton paint. Would we do that to an ordinary audience? No, of course not. This was not a circus. Halfway home, I remembered that I hadn't properly engaged the alarms. The code was still tucked away in my wallet. Sure, I'd locked the doors, but without any alarms, anyone could just pick the lock and walk right in. It would probably be fine, but I felt like I had to do something right, if only just one thing. So I turned around and drove all the way back. I heard my phone being overloaded with likes, shares, and messages. The Ballet After Dark aesthetic was an interesting take and made for great pictures. Maybe it'd inspire something new someday. Once I got back to the venue, I double-checked all the doors and windows. Not only had I missed turning on the alarm, I'd left one of the back doors unlocked. As I locked the place up and turned off all the lights, I hurried through the main hall to lock down the side doors. As I was about to turn on the alarm, I noticed something. A single light that refused to turn off. It wasn't one of our spotlights, as the light flickered like a flame. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. "Anyone here?" I called out. "Sabrine?" No answer. Without a word, someone walked out on stage. She was dressed in this large black dress with puffy shoulders and a black scarf. She tiptoed on her bare feet. With every step, they snapped like twigs. A ballerina is graceful and elegant, and to some degree, that described the woman who'd stepped out on stage. She might have been a great performer once, but that was no longer the case. The harsh overhead light made it hard for me to distinguish her facial features. Her ill-kempt blonde hair made it even harder. As she stepped out in the middle of the stage, I couldn't help but to stare. Every step she took was calculated. As she took the arabesque position, I could tell something was terribly wrong. Her legs struggled to remain straight, and she had no strength in her left foot. She had trouble keeping her balance, and I could hear painful sounds as bones and sinew snapped under the pressure. Her black scarf wasn't just an accessory, it was there to keep her wobbly neck in place. As the scarf slowly unraveled, I could hear the crack of her neck as she moved from position to position. As she readied herself for a Sisson jump, I just gasped a hoarse "no!" She collapsed onto the floor, a pile of broken limbs dressed in black. Her arm twisted and turned the wrong way, and her right wrist seemed close to falling off. Chunks of her hair were falling out on stage, and still, she tried to get back up. One snapping tendon failing after another. A chill crept up my spine as I noticed a wind coming from the ceiling. It almost sounded like a flute. I let out a forced breath, only to see it blossom into a cloud. How hadn't I noticed the cold? The performer couldn't get back up, and instead just lay there. I had to show this to someone. I just had to. Someone had to see what I was seeing. As I brought up my phone and aimed the camera at the stage, I felt a light tapping on my shoulder. "Pass des photos," somebody whispered. Somebody cold. I put down my phone. It seemed like an eternity. I just stood there watching. The broken woman groaned and turned, failing to get back on her feet. Instead, just lay there, writhing back and forth like a wounded insect. Her frustrated cries echoed from the stage, groans turning into pained wheezing. Without turning my head, I tried to see whoever was behind me. I didn't want to turn around. I had this instinct screaming at me to just wait it out. One more bad move and I might not make it out. Rational thought would have to take a backseat. I must have stood there for the better part of 10 minutes. I was so stiff my feet were getting numb. Suddenly a cold wind blew through the hall, and with it, the overhead light went out. Before the stage drowned in darkness, I met the eyes of the broken dancer. Her eyes were empty. Once the stage grew quiet, I ran towards the exit. I slammed the door open, leaving the building and everything in it behind. I didn't think a second about closing up or locking. I was just getting as much distance between me and that building as possible while my mind tried to make sense of what I'd seen. The next day, I woke in at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I had 27 missed calls, and I was running a massive fever. I texted my boss, giving up on describing the previous night entirely. Maybe it had all been a fever dream. It was certainly warranted. I was shaking. I tried going back to sleep, but those empty eyes kept haunting me. The words whispered in my ear ran a chill up my spine, worse than any fever. I couldn't let it go. Had I really seen it? How could that have happened? I twisted and turned hour after hour, not finding the slightest bit of rest. I had to do something. It took me almost 2 hours just to get dressed and brush my teeth. I tried getting in my car, but I realized I might kill someone if I got into traffic like this. Still, I had to see the show. I couldn't miss it. I'd promised I'd be there. Sabrine was expecting me. I called up an Uber, chugged a yogurt, and got to the show just as it was about to start. The back doors were unlocked, much to my chagrin. I stumbled inside, waving at the security guard. They recognized me, but was visibly worried. Maybe I didn't look my absolute best. Not really a premiere night type of outfit. Sweatpants rarely are. As I got backstage, there was the usual excitement in the air. The first act had just started, and I could feel the magic in the air. I had to see it for myself, just to make sure they were doing okay. It seemed fine. Sabrine was giving it her all. As she and Gaspard performed a perfect fish dive, I could hear the audience ooh and ah. Just like the performers were doing what was expected, so, in a way, was the audience. Then a camera flashed. For a brief moment, I saw something in the empty seats. I heard something. Maybe I imagined it, but right alongside Sabrine, I heard this other set of footsteps. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for something to snap or twist, like the broken dancer. It struck me how, even with all her training, all it took was for a misplaced step for the show to be over. Another camera flash. I looked at the other dancers backstage. We have to... I couldn't find the words. My mind cramped. I just stared out at the stage, whispering what I'd already been told. Pas de photo. Even so, there was another flash from the audience. For a brief moment, every seat in the house was full. Elegantly dressed men and women, clad in black funeral garments, mummified faces and dirt-filled mouths. And there, ready to run in from the side of the stage, was the broken dancer. Right there, in the dark corner of my eye, the lights went off. A power outage. And somewhere on stage, unhindered by the music, a terrible scream. They say that Sabrine lost her balance when the lights went out. She, on the other hand, claims someone tackled her. Either way, when the lights came back on, she was writhing on the floor with her leg broken in 4 places. Gaspard was screaming almost as loud as she was. The audience were taking more photos than ever. Flash after flash. I have never heard a scream like hers since, and seeing the terror in her eyes was one of the worst experiences of my life. It was more than just a broken bone. It was the broken heart of a ruined dream. People were rushing to help. Our backstage paramedic hurried out. Curtains were drawn, and our volunteers were trying their best to calm the audience down. I caught a glance of Sabrine as she was carried away. Her eyes for an instant looked empty. We have not performed Coppelia since. We have changed venues. I'm no longer arranging ghost ballets. For a long time, I've suspected that it was inviting outsiders to be part of the audience to be the main problem. But I have another theory. See, by the turn of the 19th century, photography was still a budding art. It was forbidden at many venues, and many ballerinas refused to allow photographers. In fact, that was one of the many rules of the Parisian companies, from which the tradition stemmed. Pas de photo. No photography. I can only hope our transgressions are forgiven in time.
I hope Sabrine is allowed to recover. And I hope, dearly, that I someday forget those hollow eyes.
Hello, and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories, straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bump in the night. On tonight's episode, a man wonders how he's still alive after he has died. So, what did your month look like? Because I was dead for 30 days.
It was an 8-hour drive back home. I'd been visiting my dad for his birthday, but I had to get home. I hadn't been able to get time off work the next day, so it was going to be a hell and a half if I didn't get there by morning. The weather wasn't on my side either. What had started as a mild wind had escalated into an incessant howling, rocking my car with gusts of wind that nearly knocked me off course. I could barely hear the radio of the raindrops knocking on my sunroof. I was 6 hours in when I came across a fallen tree. Another car had stopped ahead and called it in, but I didn't have time to stick around. I took a detour onto a smaller road. It was rural, so what's the worst that could happen? The road was more pothole than asphalt, but my GPS was still on point. It showed a 20-minute detour, but I figured it'd still be quicker than waiting for that tree to be cleared. I rounded a corner and came across a long stretch of road overlooking the countryside. There was a wheat field to the left and a pine forest to the right. It was dark, so I couldn't see anyone up ahead. No lights. I kept going straight, leaning back in my seat. All of a sudden, a car. It was parked by the side of the road. I swerved, but I ended up smashing and cracking a taillight. I came to a full stop about 20 feet further down the road. Looking back, I bit my lip. I could keep going, and that'd be that. or I could leave my insurance information. I dug around in my glove compartment and found a slip of paper, tucked it under my jacket, and got out. I made my way over to the parked car. It was a dark beige sedan that looked like it had been dug out of the 90s. I didn't want to pry, but I couldn't help but to see something odd. There were at least 3 duffel bags in the back seat. I got my papers out and slipped them under the wipers, along with a $20 bill as an apology. I was walking back to my car when I noticed someone approaching. I noticed a couple of details. They had a dirty shovel flung over their shoulders and were holding another duffel bag. That made it 4 in total. I had this uneasy feeling. I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to. This person had been digging something up in the middle of a rainstorm. I couldn't imagine they wanted someone to see them do it. I got out of the rain and into the driver's seat. I put the keys in and fired up the engine. It made a bit of a huffing noise, as if wanting to stall, but it didn't. Then someone knocked on my window. I could have put my foot on the gas, but I didn't. Instead, I turned my head only to see a stern-looking man in his early 50s. He had a thick mustache and a black baseball cap, a look that made me think of someone trying their best to be forgettable and neutral. He was holding a gun. He made a rolling motion with his hand.
Let's have a short conversation before you go running off, sir,
He said.
It'll just be a couple minutes.
I rolled down the window. It was dawning on me just how bad this could get if I wasn't careful. We were alone on a small, nondescript road during bad weather, and no one knew I was there. And he didn't look like the type of person who was eager for a rational discussion. Sorry about the taillight, I said. Mind lowering that pistol there? He forced a smile.
I would mind, yes.
He reached his arm in through the open window and unlocked the door. Opening it, he motioned for me to step out. I looked back at the steering wheel, not sure what to do. Maybe I could get away if I did something sudden.
I wouldn't do that.
He said.
It'll get messy.
I didn't see anything, I assured him. I'm just passing through.
I'm sure you didn't. Now step out.
Looking down the barrel of a gun, I was inclined to listen. I stepped out. My mouth went dry as my senses heightened. I could feel the blood rushing to my head. I don't know what you think I saw, I said. It was just a duffel bag and a shovel. I don't even know you.
Just step right this way.
He said, pointing me to the side of the road. I didn't see the license plate. Hell, I can hardly see you. It's raining too much, you know?
Fair enough.
He pointed at something up in the pine woods.
Can you see that?
He asked. I leaned in and looked closely. There was nothing up there, just pine trees and rain. Then I realized what he was doing. He was making me stand still. I didn't have time to turn my head before he fired the gun. Now, a lot of stories would have ended here. That would make sense. Even though I barely knew the guy or what he'd done, he wasn't taking any chances. He shot me point blank in the head. I had no idea what happened next, but I've figured out a couple of things. He pushed my car into a lake, and he buried me in a shallow grave just east of that road, in a field right up a hill. Writing it out like this, it seems almost detached. Like it didn't really happen. Like it happened to someone or something else. But I can't say it any other way. He killed me, and I didn't even understand why. In terms of time, it felt like blinking. One moment there's a flash and a bang. The next, I'm inhaling dirt. I almost choked then and there. A first sour breath, bitter with the salt of the earth. I flailed around until the air touched my fingertips. Then I dug. I gasped for breath, but all I got was mud and grass. Finally, my face broke the surface. I wheezed, sucking in the night. Only then did I realize that my heart was still beating out of my chest. I was still surprised by the loud sound, the gunshot. The rain had seemingly cleared up, but it was late. I was out in a field. It was a small glade in the middle of a pine forest, where I was surrounded by these strangely colored sunflowers. They were probably white, but they looked kind of blue in the moonlight. I just had the clothes on my back. He'd taken my phone, my car keys, my smartwatch, everything. He'd buried me alive, I thought. But the strangest thing about it was that right where I'd been lying, there was a cross. It was crude. A couple of broken 2x4s nailed together. It looked more like a plus, but what the hell kind of murderer leaves their victim alive and marks their grave? That's when it hit me. He didn't leave me alive. He'd shot me in the back of the head. I touched my skull back to front, but there was nothing wrong with it. Not even a bruise. Physically, I was perfectly fine. But that just didn't make any sense. What the hell had happened? How could I be okay? I had no idea where to go, so I just picked a direction and hoped for the best. It was dark, but the moonlight helped a little. Looking back at that weird glade, I couldn't help but feel watched, as if those creepy sunflowers were all turning my way. First things first, I was gonna get to the police. This man was a menace. I had the time and a clear description in my head. The rest would work itself out. It took me about 20 minutes to make it to a road. The same road where I'd run into him, I figured. Or maybe that's just what all roads look like in rural Minnesota. In 2 hours, only a single car passed me on that road, and they weren't eager to stop for hitchhikers. I could see why the guy had picked this spot. It was the middle of nowhere. That I'd ended up there was just bad luck. Wrong place at the wrong time, apparently. Astronomical odds. I'd been following the road for longer than I cared to admit, when a couple of headlights slowed down behind me. Looking back, I could see a middle-aged woman driving a pickup.
You lost?
She called out. Sort of, I said, turning my pockets inside out. Rob.
Are you okay?
She asked. Not really.
Are you on drugs?
I wish. She scoffed at me and leaned over, opening the passenger side door.
Get in.
My eyes went heavy the moment I sat down. I felt the heat of the car melting my bones, turning my body into butter. I almost nodded off then and there.
Looks like you've had one hell of a night.
She said.
Where you headed?
The police, I guess. I said, can you call them?
I can, but there ain't no one around till morning.
She said.
Unless it's urgent.
It's kind of urgent.
Look, you're not on fire and no one's hurt. They're not coming out to get you till morning, that's all I'm saying.
I wiped some dirt off my face and nodded. Nearest motel, then.
Nonsense.
She smiled.
You can have my kids' room just for the night.
Appreciate it. Her name was Marianne. She worked at a water treatment plant, not too far away, and was coming home from a night out with her work friends. As a single mother to a now-grown kid, she didn't mind lending some empty nest space out to a stranger in need. I feel like between Marianne and the man who shot me in the head, I'd managed to find the two kinds of people you might run into in rural Minnesota. I got to borrow a room next to her garage for the night. I took a shower and threw my clothes in the washer. Marianne didn't have much food to share, but she microwaved me some leftovers. Lasagna. We talked a bit about what had happened, but I didn't have much to say. It was so hard to describe. I couldn't just babble on about how I'd crawled out of a hole in the ground. So I said I'd been mugged and had my car stolen at gunpoint. It was an uneasy sleep. It's like my heart wouldn't settle down, no matter how comfortable I was. I kept feeling like I was on the edge of bursting into a sprint. Like there was still an immediate danger. It was like I kept hearing the click of the gun, anticipating the painful flash of the bullet burning past the hairs on my neck. The following morning, Marianne made breakfast. She was chatty, and making breakfast brought out the people person in her.
That road is trouble,
She said.
but I guess you're not the worst thing we found there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
She continued.
Did you see the, hold on.
She wiped her hands on a towel and lent me her phone. She had a social media post up about a dead man. I recognized him. It was the man, the one who shot me. There wasn't a lot to it. A small post talking about how he'd been a couple of weeks from turning 71, how he'd passed suddenly in his car. There were dozens of posts talking about how much they were going to miss him and how great of a guy he'd been. I figured they hadn't known much about his extracurricular activities. Good people don't shoot other good people in the head. Before I handed her the phone back, I noticed something odd. Right there, by the time. The date. 31 days had passed. I almost choked on my orange juice. This was beyond explanation. It didn't make any sense. 31 days. I handed Marianne her phone back. I mulled the options over in my head. I wanted to call my mom, but I couldn't remember her number. It was saved on my phone, which was gone. Besides, what would I tell her? Again, you can't just tell people you've crawled out of a hole in the ground. I figured I could do a little research. Try to figure out what had happened before I went to the police. Maybe there was a logical explanation for all of this. maybe I just missed it. If so, a little research was a small price to pay, to not sound insane. Thanks, I said. You know where this guy lived?
You know him?
She asked. Sort of, I said. An acquaintance.
I mean, yeah, I can show you his place if you want.
I had to know more. There were too many questions in the air right now, and I had to get a couple of answers before I started to untangle it. If I could figure out why this guy had shot me in the head, maybe I could go to the police with something concrete. How the hell 31 days had passed would have to wait. Marianne drove me downtown. I don't remember the name of the town, but it was small. Basically just a collection of houses by the side of a quasi-busy street. It had gone from late autumn to early winter in those 31 days, and it showed. The morning frost was just melting off the sleeping trees. She turned onto a small road just off Main Street. The house we looked for stood out like a sore thumb, the only white house with red detailing. It looked like a big shed had swallowed a candy cane. Hideous. It was clear that no one had been there in a while. Some kids had broken the windows. A couple of trees in the yard cast long shadows across the bare dirt, accentuating the Midwestern morning sun. There was that small town smell in the air. Mud, melted frost, diesel. I thanked Marianne and she handed me $50.
There's a motel just down the street.
She said.
Ought to be a couple of rooms there if you need some space.
God bless that woman. As she drove away, I walked up to the front door. The lock was broken, and there were a couple of spray tags on the side. The door was barely holding onto the hinges, having been rocked back and forth by harsh winds. The inside was pretty lackluster. The guy was clearly a loner. No pictures on the walls, no pets, barely any decorations. A couple of polite postcards from acquaintances piled up in the hallway. Empty plates on the kitchen table. Checking the fridge, there was half a six-pack and a jar of pickles. That's it. It was empty. If this guy was turning 71, there were no signs of a long life. In fact, there were no signs of anything. You could tell there'd been people going through the place. Furniture had been moved and broken. There were scratch marks on the floor from where someone had tried to break the floorboards. There was also some cigarette smoke. Maybe the guy was a chain smoker, but the place didn't smell like it. I wandered around, not really knowing what to look for. I had this feeling that knowing why he'd tried to kill me might shed some light on things, but it really didn't. It's like the post said, he'd just tipped over and died. It was hard to accept that maybe, just maybe, I'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe I'd never know for sure. Still, the guy had it coming. Whatever the reason, you just don't kill people in cold blood. Leaving that house behind, the question remained, why me? What did I do? There was no point in grinding it over and over in my head. I figured I'd get a room at that motel, get in touch with the police, and get back on the road. My family had to be worried sick. I felt a little bad for spending this much time running around with this nonsense, but it bothered me to no end. You don't forget waking up in a shallow grave. You just don't. I followed Marianne's directions and came across a gravel path. A long, winding path over a hill and through the pine woods. I spotted a peculiar tree in the distance, a dead, leafless oak. I decided to stop there to rest my feet for a bit. It had a root that curled around itself, making it an excellent seat. I sat down to ponder my options. But see, I do this thing when I'm deep in thought. I scratch something over and over with my left index finger. There's something about the sensation of running your finger over something textured that just numbs my mind. So as I sat there and considered my next move, I did just that. I scratched a bit. Right in that exact spot, something had already scratched the bark off. I pulled my finger back, sticky with sap. Someone had been sitting here, just like I was. They'd been scratching that spot, just like I'd done. Odd. Following the trail, I ended up next to two buildings down by the main road. There it was, the motel and a supermarket. There was a woman outside the motel smoking a cigarette. She kept looking my way, so I waved at her.
You here to pick up your stuff?
She asked. What?
Your stuff.
She repeated.
I'll throw it away if you don't.
No, yeah, I'll get it. Sorry. I had no idea what she was talking about, but she clearly intended to talk to me. There was no mistaking it. She'd seen me before. She was very comfortable in that fact. So much so that it made me question if we had history. I joined her outside the motel and waited for her to finish her cigarette. I got a stern talking to about leaving things behind. Apparently, there was only so much space in the lost and found. I apologized, which eased the tension a bit. Maybe she was expecting some kind of entitled big city folk talk from me. She said she'd give me 20 minutes to clear out the room and handed me a key. I hurried down the hall and up the stairs. Standing outside that room, and I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been there before. I'd never seen this woman. And yet, she seemed to know me. Or at the very least, she'd seen me before. When I entered, I could tell someone had been living there. There were some clothes and a couple of items scattered across the nightstand. It didn't take long until a chill crawled up my spine. The clothes in that room were my size. There was a toothbrush in a green plastic case in the bathroom, just like I always keep it. I'm a bit squeamish about bacteria, which begged to question, had I been there before? I decided to do a test. If I had been there before, my phone would be tucked away and hidden near the bed. I'd had some bad experiences with staff, stealing my electronics in the past, so I leaned over the bed and fumbled around for a bit. And there it was. I found my phone nuzzled between the wall and the bed. But more than that, I found something hidden underneath. A black metal box with a 4-digit code. I tested the first 4-digit code that came to mind, and voila, it popped open. In it, I found a gun, 6 bullets, a stack of about $4,100 bills, and a notebook. There was a knock at the door before I could explore a little further.
You finished?
The lady asked. Sorry, I said. It's, gonna be a while.
You staying?
Would you mind if I did?
You paying?
Of course, yeah.
All right then.
I sat there for a moment, taking it all in. How could I have known it would be there? And how would I know the code? How could I have been in that room without remembering anything about it? It didn't make sense, but I was holding the proof in my hands. There had to be answers. I paid for a couple of days and locked myself in that room. I gathered all clothes and checked all the corners to make sure there was nothing else hidden in there. It felt strange, like I was following in my own footsteps. But I'd never been there before. I'd woken up in that field like no time had passed. What was I missing? I kept the TV on in the background, just to fill the empty space. I checked the phone. There were a couple of outgoing calls. A few of them short, a couple of them a little longer. Some of them were dated from about 10 to 15 days after I was attacked. In the empty space I couldn't account for. Those were 30 days of my life that were just gone. But something had happened in between. There were a couple of texts, too. Most of them were just people being worried, asking if I was okay. There were a couple of replies sent from this phone, but just a few. They were short, just saying, I'm fine. But one text stood out. It was from my younger sister.
Why are they saying you're dead?
She wrote. There had been no response. Dead. I immediately tried to call her, but my phone was disconnected. Either the service was discontinued or I hadn't paid my bills. Either way, I wasn't getting through. I decided to check the notebook. The pages were dated starting at about 21 to 22 days after my supposed death. It mentioned waking up in a field of blue sunflowers, disoriented and looking for help. It mentioned getting a ride to town from an old man in a blue van. Other entries mentioned talking to people about my assailant, only to find out he'd already died. It seems that my first instinct was always to find the guy who killed me, and always finding out that he was gone. These notes spoke about an experience that was almost identical to mine. About waking up, about getting to a motel, about looking up the house of our attacker. Apparently, that's where they'd found the gun and the money. Maybe it hadn't been kids messing up the place. Maybe it was me. The notes also mentioned a letter left behind. It just said that he was sorry, the note read. There were more notes, dates, connections. So I flipped to an empty page, grabbed a pen, and tried to put it all into a coherent timeline. It seems that about 10 days after getting shot in the head, I'd woken up in a field for the first time. I'd tried to find the man who did it, but he had already died more than a week prior. According to the notebook, the man had died either the same night that I did or the day after. Then, on day 20, I'd woken up in a field. Again. I'd made my way back to town to find the man who killed me, but he was already dead. For the next few days, I'd been locked up in this very motel, trying to figure out what was going on. I'd made numerous calls, sent texts, and a couple of emails, only to be told that I'd been declared dead. Apparently, I'd walked into the police station on day 19 and fell over, dead. Complete organ failure, according to the coroner. The notes warned me about contacting friends and family, telling me I'd just cause harm and confusion. For all they knew, I was gone. Talking to them would open a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. But I wasn't dead. I was right there reading that notebook. From all I could gather, there seemed to be a pattern. Every 10 days, I would wake up in that field as if nothing had happened. I would believe I'd just gotten killed by that man, and I'd seek to either get help or revenge. But he was already dead. The world had moved on. But the notes didn't speak of me having seen any other versions of myself. So what exactly happened to every version? Did they all drop dead? The final entry hinted at an answer. It simply read, "I can feel my heart slowing down. I haven't been able to relax for over a week, and now it's getting hard to move. I have to pry my fingers open with my teeth. My toes have turned black. I'm seeing things. I see the one before me. I see you reading this. I know what is about to, and to prove it, I will put a cross on that spot. It will be the first thing you will see. The cross." The old man hadn't been the one to put that up. I had. This was the working theory. Every 10 days, I would wake up in that field, and every 9 or 10 days after that, I'd die, only for a new me to wake up, repeating the cycle. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I turned everything in that notebook in and out, looking for answers. There were a couple of notes about checking the library, talking to people about local legends, mentions of those strange sunflowers, but there were no answers. It was all dead ends and vague nonsense. I didn't know what to do. The first version of me had fumbled around, confused and scared, and died. The second version had tried to figure things out but was still gone. What the hell could I do that those two didn't? And did this mean I was going to die in about a week? Every idea that I had was in that notebook. It was already there, and it had failed. I'd checked the soil in that glade. I'd talked to the locals. I'd researched similar myths and legends. I'd tried burying myself in that soil again, as if I could go back somehow. But no, I'd been killed and buried among those flowers, and they refused to stop bringing me back. And it did so about every 10 days. I wasted that entire day trying to piece it all together. I fell asleep somewhere around 9 in the evening, still holding that notebook. I kept falling in and out of sleep, having these uneasy thoughts. I kept imagining that first breath as I breached the surface, digging myself out of a shallow grave, the confusion, the ringing in my ears from that gunshot. But there were other things in the dark of my dreams. The sound of my feet rushing into that house, desperately digging through a home, only to find a gun and a letter, scaring off a few kids, making them drop their spray cans as they fled. Then, there was the sound of people crying and screaming in my ear. Questions I can't answer. Desperation on all ends, building into this tight knot in my chest that no comforting word could untangle. Then, a lake. Aching joints. A final swim as my bones fossilized and decayed. I was at peace knowing I was about to go, and I chose to do it in a way where no one would be bothered. And now me, here, alone in a motel, trying not to hear the ticking clock, trying not to think of what happens when my 10 days were up. The next day, I sprang into action. I washed the cold sweat off my brow and decided to answer what questions remained in that notebook. I would do anything. There had to be a solution. Things always work out, one way or another. Checking recently used apps, I found out that my previous iteration, the second copy, had used a map. They'd searched for nearby lakes. There was that one lake called Frog Lake nearby, and they just walked into it. That must have been the way they chose to end things. Out of sight, out of mind. But the biggest questions remain. Why had that old man killed me to begin with? I fell into a vicious cycle of anxiety, desperation, and failure. I tried to find his car, but it had been destroyed. I tried to find any of his relatives, but he had none. All who had posted had been acquaintances and friends he'd made. I messaged a couple of them using the motel Wi-Fi, but they either didn't respond or had nothing to say. I tried to check for prior convictions, but he had none. I tried to find out something about his gun, but it was unregistered. The serial number had been filed off. I couldn't even find out where he got the bullets. And why had he apologized? Why leave me money? The only thing I could think of were those duffel bags of his. And his digging. There had to be a reason. The nights were getting worse. I was seeing little glimpses of things that had been. Crying in the motel room, rushing into the police station, tearing out notes from the notebook, and clawing at my face until it bled. Frustration, hopelessness, and desperation. And with every glimpse, every dream, I started to realize how futile this was. Every idea, every thought, everything I'd tried. I'd already done it. I was just repeating patterns. I was in a race against myself and nothing would change. On day 5, I made my way back out to that glade. Retracing my steps, I found that it was surprisingly close to where he had parked his car that night. Most of the ground there was gravel and rock, but the soil in that glade was soft and malleable. To me, the only thing that made sense was that he'd been digging for something up there. The cross was still up there. I couldn't stop looking at it. What had I thought as I put that up? Did I still have hope? That night, I started seeing other things. Not just things that had been, but things that were to come. Years from now. Waking in that same glade. The cross long since withered by age. A little bag left by the side. A welcome package. The sunflowers would still be there. The cars would look different. Quieter, cleaner. Over time, the roads would deteriorate. The sun would be warmer. I'd draw thousands upon thousands of the same first breath, over and over. I'd ask myself the same questions. I'd try the same thing, and I'd come to the same conclusions. I forced myself awake before I went too far. I didn't want to see. I didn't want to know. The clock was ticking. On day 6, I had completely given up. I just lay there in the motel room, watching daytime TV, eating stale chips from the supermarket across the street. I juggled 10-minute naps with bouts of existential panic, feeling my heart race through my chest as my lungs tightened. I could hear it in the back of my mind. That ticking clock. It was almost over. Forever. I tore my hair out. I crawled into a fetal position, laying in the shower until the water turned cold. But whenever I closed my eyes a little too long, I'd hear myself drawing that first breath again and again, coming to the same horrifying realization. And before I knew it, it would be over. And it would be over and over and over. And I'd never really know what had happened until it was too late. By the night of day 6, I might as well have been dead. I just lay there, naked, on the floor, dissociating. I don't want to talk about day 7. It got worse, and I did a lot of things I wasn't proud of. So I'm skipping ahead to day 8. On day 8, I took a walk downtown. There was a corner pub where I decided to have lunch. By happenstance, 2 police officers walked in. They were having a discussion, and I couldn't help but overhear it.
That doesn't make any sense.
One of them said.
How can the guy have his own bones in a duffel bag?
That's the thing.
The other said.
He must have had a twin. They were identical.
So, all these years, there have been 2 of them, and no one knew?
It's like some Parent Trap shit.
The officer laughed.
Can you imagine?
Bones. Duffel bag. There was something there. They had to be talking about it. I hurried back to the motel. My killer had been digging the night he killed me. He'd left his gun and bullets in a box, telling me he was sorry, along with some money. They'd found bones in his duffel bags that were identical to his own. But what if they weren't an identical twin? What if they were a copy of him? Or maybe he was the copy. I bought a shovel of my own and made my way back out to that glade that same day. Checking the soil where I'd been buried, I dug. And I dug deep. Maybe there was a reason I'd been buried in a shallow grave. Maybe there was something else further down. I dug until my muscles ached and my lungs burned. I dug all afternoon in different places, and finally, I found something. About 5 foot deep, there was a body bag. It was covered in chemicals, but the smell was unmistakable. There was a corpse in there. I knew what I'd see before I even opened it. The zipper struggled, but it rolled open, challenging every sensation in my body. It's a strange feeling to hold your own face, to see your own closed eyes, to stroke your own hair in comfort, the little quirks and scars that only you know of, except for that one thing, a bullet hole. I collapsed to my knees. I'd figured it out. From a stray thought mentioned by a passerby, I figured it out. There was a reason that man had such a bare-bones home, why he looked 50, although he was 70. He'd gone through this. He'd been in the cycle before me. Killing me and having me take his place in the ground must have broken the cycle. There was an end to it. That's why he apologized. That's the reason he just killed a random person by the side of the road. It wouldn't end until someone took his place. If not me, then someone else. So that meant that I had two options. I could go through this nightmare over and over, or I could end it. I could cut those who would come after me out of the equation and spare them the horror I felt. I could do that. Now I had options. That night, after I'd washed the dirt from my hands and knees, the dreams were different. I felt myself drawing another first breath, only to wake up under a starless sky, where the sun had gone dim, and the moon hung closer than ever. I could hear rumbling earth as towering monolithic beings reached for the horizon sky. I'd see vaguely humanoid shapes roam a desert wasteland, stretching towards the heavens, crying for death, crying for an end to the cycle, like me. But there would be more first breaths. Ones where I would wake up in a firestorm only to burn to death. Ones where I would wake up choking under solid ice. Ones where I would be pulled up by inhumane scavengers, only to be torn apart and eaten, farmed and cultivated, like wheat. And the cycle would continue, turning life into a grotesque, broken mirror image of what I'd been told it would be. Lies and hopes made manifest by church, state, and peers. This was real life, uncompromising, uncaring, raw. And then there'd be no air. Then there'd be no soil. There'd be black. An impossible cold would snap across my crystallizing skin. My eyes would be open, but there would be nothing to see. No sound to hear but the popping of my eardrums. I'd fail to draw that first breath of air once every 10 days. Again, and again, and again. I woke up screaming on the 9th day. I had no choice. I had to break the cycle. Someone had to take my place in that void. I could see why he'd done it, and I would do so myself without hesitation. I grabbed the gun, the bullets, the shovel, and made my way to the glade. While the old man had just been bones, I had a whole body to take care of. It didn't matter. I could leave it out in the open, and it would make no difference. By the time it mattered, I'd be gone, and the cycle would be broken. So I waited by the side of the road, like he'd done. My body had been dug up and was ready to be moved. I didn't want to do it in the daylight, though, but time was running out. I didn't even care that I was going away. I just had to avoid that thing that were to come, the infinite awakenings that followed. A lot of cars passed me by. Some honked at me, others went out of their way to splash me with water collected in the many potholes. It wasn't until dinner time that a car slowed down to help. A good Samaritan, a pickup truck, Mary Ann. No, I muttered under my breath. Just keep going, not you. But it was getting late. Could I risk waiting for someone else? She rolled down the window on the passenger side, smiling at me. Her radio clicked off.
You back here?
She laughed.
What kind of trouble you looking for?
I'm fine, I said. You can keep going.
Fine?
She scoffed.
You're right back where you started. Don't tell me you got robbed again.
Not this time, no.
So why you here?
I had my hand on my gun. There was no one else around. She was leaning forward, and I had a clear shot to her head. I'd just raise my hand, click, and that would be it. It was simple. Would I risk missing this chance, just for her to get some more time? In the grand scheme of things, what would it matter? And what if the next copy of me came to the same conclusion? What would stop them from pulling the trigger? It was either me now or me later. And if not her, then someone else. Did it matter who? I wouldn't be around to care. I could barely keep it together. My hand trembled. She leaned over, looking out the passenger side window. Her brow furrowed a little. I could tell she was concerned.
Look,
She said,
I won't pretend to know your business, but I can see you're not doing well. You must have come across something real bad, friend. I get it. But you know what I do when I feel bad?
She patted the passenger side of her pickup.
I do something nice. It does all the difference in the world. If you can't help yourself, then maybe you can help someone else. Does the heart good, you know?
A thought crossed my mind. I hadn't figured this puzzle out if it hadn't been for me just sticking around. It wasn't being smart or strong or suave. It was a stray bit of luck presented by two cops having a conversation. So maybe it didn't matter if I couldn't see a solution here and now. There could be a solution elsewhere at another time that I just hadn't seen yet. And maybe I wouldn't see it, but maybe the next me would. Also, by knowing what was to come, who was to say I couldn't stop it? This outcome couldn't be completely predetermined, or else I'd have told myself about it in that notebook. I had to believe there could be a better way, that there could be a solution, and a beautiful ending. Not just for me, but for everyone. I took my hand off the gun. I just gotta get something, I said. Can you give me a couple of minutes?
Sure.
She smiled.
Don't keep me waiting.
I rushed back up to the glade and nailed a note to the cross. The next me would get a welcome package. I followed Marianne back to town, but she offered to have me stay in her son's room again. I couldn't decline. I borrowed his computer, and that's why I'm here, writing this down. I need to spell things out in a way another me will understand, and I think this is a way to do it. So if I'm reading this, hello. I'm glad you saw the note. I hope this sheds some light on things. Maybe you can make it better for the next one. My joints are growing stiffer and my heart is slowing down. It's actually sort of pleasant. The worries start to fade, but the cycle will continue. I'll be gone before long, and I'll make sure Marianne won't find me. I've called the motel, telling them I'll be back soon to keep the room. I have the money for it, at least for a while longer. It is so easy to despair, and so easy to forget our view. We can only see so far, and we can only hear so much. What feels like an endless darkness today can be a warming light by the morning. Sometimes, all we have to do is hope, to hold on, to do the best we can, and trust in the way things unfold. We don't even have to be smart about it or strong. Sometimes we just gotta be at the right place, at the right time. I don't know how many hours I have left. It's strange to count yourself in hours. It's nice not to know for sure. I'm gonna go for a walk and see how far I'll go. Take a deep breath as if it's your first. You have all the time in the world.